Spinosaurus, or spine lizard, was one of the largest carnivores to ever live on our planet. This title can be debated depending on what exactly you define as a carnivore. But in any case, Spinosaurus would have been right up there amongst the biggest meat-eaters, rivaling the likes of Giganotosaurus and Tyrannosaurus rex. A full-grown male could reach lengths of over 18 meters and weigh more than a ton. That is larger than even the mighty T-Rex. It had a huge sail-like structure on its back that we've seen depicted in many different ways in movies and TV shows. It is also sometimes known as a fin, but it's not entirely certain what this structure was used for. Maybe it helped with swimming, maybe it was used for display or for temperature regulation, or perhaps it served multiple purposes. We don't know for sure. The thing about the sail is that when you look at the fossils that we've found so far, they are often broken and fragmented. This means that paleontologists don't have the full picture and have to make educated guesses based on what they do have. One of the most complete sauropod fossils we've found so far, by the way, is still hidden inside of a rock matrix and has yet to be fully excavated. So how did this enormous reptile spend its time? Well, evidence suggests that it was semi-aquatic, spending lots of time both on land and in water. What's really fascinating about this is that most large carnivores prefer to stay mostly on land. Even crocodiles and alligators tend to avoid deep open water. So it's unusual for a predator of this size to spend so much time in the water. This brings us to what the Spinosaurus likely did in the water. There's a popular idea out there that it spent its entire life in the water, hunting fish and other marine creatures, just like today's crocodiles. However, this isn't entirely accurate. Most of the Spinosaurus prey actually lived in the swamps and rivers, not the open water. Basically, it would hang out in the shallows, where it could ambush fish, shellfish, turtles, and even early relatives of whales and dolphins. It would also target other animals that we wouldn't expect to see getting attacked by a predator of this size. One of these animals was the Basilosaurus, which was an enormous 14-meter-long whale monster. Even though the basilisk was very large, it was relatively slow and was probably hunted by the likes of Spinosaurus. It was basically a huge prehistoric version of a manatee, and although it did have some teeth, they weren't used for capturing prey. Instead, it mainly used them for crushing aquatic plants. This meant that it was completely defenseless against powerful jaws and sharp teeth. Now, even though the Spinosaurus was amazing in the water, it wasn't quite so graceful on land. Just like other semi-aquatic animals such as crocodiles, it would move incredibly slow when it was on land. But once it hit the water, it became much faster and more agile. It could swim at speeds of around 30 kilometers per hour and could easily chase down any prey that it wanted. In fact, it was probably one of the scariest-looking creatures to ever exist. Just imagine a gigantic crocodile with a huge dorsal fin and terrifyingly sharp teeth coming straight towards you in the water. You may not have been able to outrun it on land, but you didn't stand a chance in the water either. Even though it was one of the largest predators around, it still had competition. There were other large carnivores in its ecosystem that it would have needed to watch out for. This included the famous sea megalodon, which was the largest shark to ever live. Some people say that these two would have been natural enemies and would have battled it out in the water. Megalodons could grow to over 20 meters in length and were basically the apex predators of the oceans. They would have fed on the same prey as the Spinosaurus, including the giant whale monster Basilosaurus. So it's possible that the two would have competed with each other. That being said, the Spinosaurus did live during the Cretaceous period, whereas the Megalodon lived during the Eocene epoch. These are two completely different times, meaning that they probably didn't interact all that much. The Megalodon went extinct around 23 million years ago, whereas the Spinosaurus lived between around 99 and 94 million years ago. It's worth keeping in mind, though, that these dates are approximations, and we can't say for sure when the last Spinosaurus died out. It's important to remember that the Spinosaurus wasn't the only large carnivore in its ecosystem. It lived alongside the likes of Suchomimus, which was another large crocodile-like predator. This was around 12 meters in length and was also a semi-aquatic hunter, so there would have been quite a bit of competition for food between these two. One of the reasons that we know so much about the Spinosaurus is because of the large number of fossils that have been found in North Africa. A lot of these fossils have come from Morocco, but others have also been found in Egypt, Algeria, Libya, and Tunisia. The fossil that was found in Egypt in the 1920s was originally thought to belong to a sauropod. However, it was later realized that it belonged to the spine lizard. This fossil is now kept in the Cairo Museum and is one of the most famous examples of this dinosaur that we have today. What's interesting about this particular fossil is that it shows signs of trauma right before it died. A large piece of bone is missing from its skull, and it also has a damaged shoulder blade. This makes us wonder if it was injured during a fight with another animal, or if it was simply defending itself against a rival. We may never know for sure what caused these injuries, but it's certainly an interesting discovery. It's thought that the Spinosaurs lived near river deltas and hunted in the shallow water. It was attracted to areas where the water was murky and dark, because this made it easier to sneak up on its prey. The waters that it preferred would have looked something like the Florida Everglades or the Louisiana bayous. In fact, it's thought that the Spinosaurs may have had a similar lifestyle to the American alligator. However, it was obviously much larger and would have hunted much larger prey. Sometimes it would have targeted animals that we wouldn't expect to see getting attacked by a predator of this size. As mentioned before, the Basilosaurus was probably on the menu, but oddly enough, the Spinosaurus would have also hunted sea turtles. It would have fed on the eggs of these turtles, but it would have also targeted the adults. Even though sea turtles are usually pretty quick in the water, the Spinosaurus would have been too fast for them. Also, they probably didn't have the physical capabilities to defend themselves against those terrifying jaws and sharp teeth. Speaking of those teeth, the Spinosaurus had a total of 60 teeth. These were serrated and pointed, very much like the teeth of a crocodile or an alligator. It used these to slice through flesh like butter, and they were designed for catching slippery prey. It's estimated that it took around 7,000 pounds of pressure to bite down on its prey. Some of the most exciting things about the Spinosaurus are the famous hypothetical battles that it has had with other dinosaurs. Of course, these aren't real battles and are simply fun ideas that people have come up with. But it's always fun to think about what would happen if two prehistoric monsters went head-to-head. One of the most common matchups is the Spinosaurus vs. Tyrannosaurus rex. This is a battle that has been decided in many different ways, but ultimately it would likely go to the T-Rex. Another fun matchup is the Spinosaurus vs. Mosasaurus. The Mosasaurus was another large marine reptile that lived during the late Cretaceous. It was definitely a match for the Spinosaurus in the water, but the Spinosaurus would have easily won on land. There's also the matchup between the Spinosaurus and the sea megalodon. Once again, the answer is pretty obvious. The megalodon would win. It was simply too large and powerful for the Spinosaurus to take on. What do you think would happen in a battle between the Spinosaurus and another large carnivore? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, but now it's time to make your voice heard. A massive thanks to all of my supporters who helped to make this video, and a special thanks to those of you in the credits for supporting the channel. But don't worry if you're not in the credits, because every single person who supports the channel helps me to make these videos. I couldn't do it without all of you. If you want to see your name in the credits too, then check the links in the description. Whichever option you choose, you'll get access to our exclusive server where I post fun stuff every week and I reply to your comments. Now it's time to move on. Keep watching to find out what happened to the megalodon, the biggest shark that ever lived.